And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight we're going to be joined by my guest, Daphanne. Daphanne reached out to me a while back. She works in the psychology field. She had some interesting things to talk about. So I'm definitely looking forward to diving into that. But before we do, if you've ever had an experience and you'd like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, there's a couple things you can do. You can send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Just make sure to reach out. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. If you would like to help the podcast out, please continue to share it around. Word of mouth is the best way of helping grow the podcast. So if you've been doing that, just know I appreciate you. You can also help out by leaving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts at. Just click the 5-star button. If you happen to write something out, I'll try and make sure to read it on an upcoming episode. You can help out by joining the Patreon, becoming a member. There's 2 different tiers, the paid tier and the free tier. Make sure to find more information about that in the show notes. Also, make sure to look for me on social media. You can find Brandon Tinfoil Tales on Facebook. There's also the Tinfoil Tales page that's on there too, where you can follow me around on Instagram. But I think now we're going to go ahead and bring Daphanne on. Definitely looking forward to talking with her. And hope you guys find it interesting. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Daphanne. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
My name is Daphanne Peters. I am working on my doctorate in general psychology. What I do currently is psychological therapy. And I am one of a handful of therapists in California who is willing to focus on paranormal psychology. And what else would I say? Been in the field about 12 years. So I like to look at things from a scientific perspective first. And often, in my experience, there is no scientific explanation that we can see right away. Let's go with that.
No. I don't know a whole lot about. You would think with talking with people and everyone, I would be someone interested in psychology, and I really have been. That's something that's always fascinated me. It's like with the human mind and everything else, but it's never been anything that I've really dove into very much. So talking with someone that actually has a background in it is something that's always piqued my interest, because it's always been something that's always been in the back of my mind. Like, I want to know more about the human psyche, why we see the things we do, why do people feel the way they feel, why they think the way they think. So it's always been something I've been curious about.
Well, and psychology is an interesting beast because the textbooks might say one thing, but then my personal experience working with people might say something completely different. And when you're dealing with something like faith manipulation, which is something I am working on becoming an expert in, faith manipulation creates a whole new element. And then when you add the paranormal to things, that creates yet another whole new element that it can be sticky among the scientific community.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to things like with paranormal and religion and everything else, like that's always, it's strange to say it this way, but I always feel like those go hand in hand, and people get argumentative about it. But religion to me, you're believing, we'll just use Christianity or whatever.
That's fine.
There's a Holy Spirit. Well, they don't believe in ghosts. They don't believe in paranormal. It's like, well, wait a minute. Your whole religion
Right.
is based upon a spirit.
Yes.
So that always cracks me up when I talk with people that get so defensive on stuff like that, because you're literally your entire life, you wrap this religion around things, but you shut off anything else because you don't believe in that stuff, but yet you're going to believe this. So
Well,
it's,
and then another aspect that I run into, and Christianity is a good example. I was raised in Christianity. Jewish grandmother raised in Christianity. Figure that out. Um, one of the things that they when they say, well, that it can't happen that way, and you're pointing out, well, that you're contradicting yourself. It's, well, God made it that way. I didn't say God didn't make it that way. I don't know why it's that way, but you're contradicting yourself.
yeah, without getting in down that whole rabbit hole of religion, I honestly feel like there's a
Absolutely.
whole lot of contradictions. I was raised in a Pentecostal church, so
Okay.
I have my own opinions on things. But no, basically, when you'd reached out to me, you'd said something about shared experiences, like, and that's kind of where I figured the conversation was going to dive into. So if you're ready to go
Absolutely.
down that path, we can go right on into it.
Absolutely. So shared experiences, we can start with like the Mandela effect, because that a lot of times two people or even a whole group of people will see something that science cannot explain. And you hear a lot of these same stories coming from these groups of people. Sorry, my phone keeps dinging and it's like, why, people? Um, so hear a lot of the same stories coming from people, but yet the scientific community says, well, that didn't happen. That's the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is, in a nutshell, when a large group of people really firmly believe something happened, but then when you go back through history, there's no evidence of that thing happening. Um, so what happened with me is, in my practice with I call them clients because I'm not a doctor yet, and even then I wouldn't be a medical doctor. Um, I started using the term shared delusions. And when I first said it, it was kind of flippant. It was meant as a joke to alleviate tension, because I had seen exactly what the person I was with had seen. I knew they were telling the truth. But it's one of those things where if you go and it's happened multiple times since that first experience, if we went and told a therapist that, there'd be a phone call made that this person needs meds. And that's why I say shared delusion. We were talking about this just before you started recording. Shared delusions kind of fall under that Mandela effect. There is no proof that thing ever happened, yet there are multiple people saying, I remember that happening. No, that's how that happened.
Mm-hmm. I think with my own, I just kind of mentioned, like, with my own personal experiences or whatever, like, and hearing other people's stuff, there's people that remember things vividly
Yeah.
together, and then it's not the same as what other people remember, or someone else says this didn't happen, but people remember it.
Right. Well,
Like,
and another thing that happens, like with group settings, and as a psychologist and I was a sociologist before, or my degree is in sociology, I should say, and then I went into psychology. Um, you're gonna have, have five people there. You're gonna have five different viewpoints, and you may have all witnessed the exact same occurrence, but we're not robots, so it plays back in our minds differently. So you're going to get five slightly varying stories. Um, you may get four slightly varying stories and one vastly different story. That happens too. But all five of those people witnessed the exact same occurrence.
it's like the human mind interprets things a little bit differently for each person.
Yes. And I'm frequently telling clients, you're not a robot. It's okay. A robot can record it and they see it the same way every time. but a human records it, if you will. And then when they replay it in their mind, they may notice different things every time. It's because we're not robots, and our minds don't work the same as a silicon life form, so to speak.
Now, do you believe that people, their perceptions change of their memory over time? Like they remember an event happening, but then over time, like that event changes of how they remember it?
I don't know that the event changes. I would say it becomes tainted by knowledge or future life experiences. An example I can use is things that I saw as a child, things that happened when I was a child. I have a knowledge base now as an adult that I did not have when I was a child. So looking back on those memories, I see them in a different light. The experience is still there. The memory is still there, but I have a different understanding of what may have been going on in the background when that experience was happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Has there been anything like it that you've experienced personally that you would want to talk about to kind of give examples to, or?
With shared delusion, I can go to the first one because that's like imprinted on my brain forever.
Okay. Yeah.
The first one that when I realized that's what was happening, that we were both seeing the same thing, and we definitely saw the same thing, which was I worked a job where I would take clients like to the doctor. I was their medical advocate. And I had the client in the car with me. We were talking, we were having, a conversation. We weren't really paying attention to what was going on around us. We were stuck in traffic. The first thing we noticed was the radio turned off. And the only reason we really noticed was because we always had the radio in the background when we were talking. It was just noise. And we're like, why did the radio turn off? That's weird. And then my client had said, oh my gosh, look. And I looked up and there was this, I'm going to call it an orb. I'm going to go with that. And it was just like floating in midair, clearly far above us, right? And we both watched it and then it zoomed away. And then the radio came back on. And when it came back on loud. Like it scared us. And my client had looked at me and she was like, did you see that? Did you hear that? And I went, shared delusion. And then after that, we giggled about it. And it was something I could say that would lift things. Looking at traffic around us, nobody else saw that. I don't know. Somebody else maybe did see it. Like, where could I go from that? But it was one of those things, and she was one who complained frequently that, when something that you can't explain, we couldn't explain that. There's this random orb. I don't know if that was ghosts, aliens, or just some weird phenomena. But we definitely saw that. And we both definitely saw that. But it was one of those things where she felt like, and she still talks to me about it. She felt like if she went to any other therapist, they would say, oh no, that didn't happen. You're crazy. And I despise therapists who use that word. Just going to throw that out there. We don't say crazy.
You both saw it though, right?
We both definitely saw it. And I mean, the radio turning off and then the radio coming back on, it came back on at full volume. We never played the radio at full volume. And neither one of us had touched the knobs. So it was just very odd. So we both definitely experienced something. Can I explain what we experienced? Not scientifically. And that's kind of where I come from. And I've heard from people, like you said, there's groups of people. You'll hear that they all had this experience that maybe we can't explain scientifically, but there's such a stigma on things that they feel like if they do talk about it, they're going to get looked at like they're crazy, like they need meds, even though they don't. They just experience something they can't explain. And there was more than one person that experienced something they can't explain.
For me, that is why I do the show, because what happened with me, you couldn't talk about it because literally people think you're crazy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make this show for people to come on here and talk about things that they can't normally talk about because you're going to be looked at by the average person as a whack job or whatever they want to call you because people see things that they just can't explain, things that don't seem normal, things that happen. Like you've seen an orb, the radio went out.
Yeah.
People see a Bigfoot running through the woods. I literally seen an upright walking canine in the middle of the road.
Oh, the Dogman. Okay.
I was with a coworker. Like he was driving a separate vehicle. He was in front of me. He swerved to miss it. We turned around and went back. Like there's a whole thing about it. I'm not gonna dive into it, but like
That's okay.
we saw things that shouldn't have been there, shouldn't have been possible. And the average person, if you don't experience it, you're never going to believe it. Like some people might say they're open minded, but unless you've actually had those experiences yourself, you don't understand it. And for me, this is why I do what I do because I've wanted answers. For 17 years, this has always bothered me that I experienced something that I can't explain. I saw something that doesn't exist. So it's always been like
Or
my
that shouldn't.
journey. Yeah. So it's like my journey is to try and find answers. And by doing what I do now, I get to talk to other people who've had similar experiences. But I'm also trying to continue my own journey. If that makes any sort of sense.
No, absolutely. And like when you describe the upright dog, like you heard me say, oh, the Dogman. One of the jobs I have done as an advocate was I would go out to homeless encampments and have to find my people because they were semi-homeless or full-on homeless in some cases. And one of my people had said, please don't come out here after dark. And I was like, why? This is where I am neurodivergent. I turn off fear. If I need to be somewhere, I will be there. What fear? And he had described that there was a dog-like creature that was attacking the homeless. I had multiple homeless people tell me that, people who were not my clients telling me that, who were living in this encampment. That's what, did it ever make the news? Of course not. Were there people that went missing? Yes. I have a client that we haven't found him in 8 months. I don't know if he's okay. So that was when you said the Dogman. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that one. I've heard that story. I haven't seen it myself, but I have heard about it from enough others that there's enough people who have seen something like that there's something to that. There has to be.
That's where I come back to when you originally had mentioned like shared experiences. A lot of people have experienced this type of thing, this phenomena. Same, like I said, with other cryptids like Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Scientifically, they don't exist. At least it's
That
never
we know
been
of.
it's never
Yeah.
been proven or admitted to or anything about it. But anywhere in just go down the path of science, there's never been an upright humanoid canine. Like
Yeah.
biologically, it doesn't make any sort of sense. And there have been so many reports of this, though. I feel like they've gotten a lot more popular within the last 10 to 15 years, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because more people have been open about it or without going down the whole, even further down the woo factor here of
Yeah.
is it like an egregore type thing? Like people are manifesting these now because they talk about it so much now that's manifested this image in people's brains to where they see the things because they hear people talk about it. Now this thing exists because they manifested it.
That would go under I might say it wrong. I've only ever seen it written a tulpa.
Yeah.
So it's like an entity that the mob creates. And there is, I mean, having studied quite a bit about demonology, I would say amateur demonologist. I do not want to be a professional demonologist. That sounds terrifying. That if there is any type of entity there, you have to wonder if the collective mind can shape that entity and conform that entity, but that means there was still something there to begin with. There's some element of truth deep down, even going with that theory.
Yeah. Well,
And I just with my clients who were in the homeless encampment, they were scared. And that was where the one gentleman was saying for me, he was like, please don't come in here. He was scared for me. I'm not afraid. I haven't seen this. What are you talking about? But they were genuinely scared of something.
I feel like a lot of people that are afraid of it that's also something that seems to be very common. I've noticed is some people say these things feed on fear. So if it is something that has been manifested, is that what it actually is feeding on? Is the fear of it?
And
Like
that's yeah, that goes with that kind of that demonic element or that evil element. Um, because does that element have an initial shape? That's another question. Does it actually have a shape, or is it taking the shape from those fears and from those stories?
the werewolf has been in lores for hundreds of years. Like obviously through Europe, they had all sorts of werewolf things, and even in ancient Egypt, they had Anubis, which was the god of had a human body, but it had the dog, wolf, jackal head, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So there's been depictions of these things for thousands of years now. And
Oh
people
yeah.
get upset that you're considering a werewolf and a dog man. I was like, well, does anyone know the difference? Like Hollywood has said a werewolf is someone that changes into a wolf. But
Vampires originally changed into wolves, though, if you read the
yes.
original Dracula.
So who is to say that these original stories, though, they blamed it on a human changing into it just because it looked humanoid?
And
Like that.
that's, I mean, then you get into like, I don't know as much about those, that lore, but the Native American lore of the Skinwalker. I believe Skinwalkers can change form as well, from what I have,
Yeah,
little bit I've read.
the Navajo tribe were the skinwalkers, and then the other ones, they all I think have their own kind of depictions of it. And
Yeah.
I found out here in the cryptid realms, if people like to refer to everything as skinwalkers, and it really upsets everybody. So
No, they're very, very
yeah,
different.
yeah. Just to clarify, like skinwalkers is strictly Navajo, not to get 800 messages from people telling me that we're wrong.
Absolutely. No,
I under
that's why I was saying I don't know as much
yeah,
about that one.
yeah, but there are shapeshifters in different Native American lore and throughout history. There's been tricksters and shapeshifters and all sorts of things. So that is very common. And who's to say if that's about, to me, I'm very skeptical. Like I say that all the time that I'm a very skeptical person, and it's hard for me to be fully invested and believe in everything because I have to stay grounded. And that's where I
Absolutely.
struggle at because I know there is no such thing as Dogman. They don't exist, but yet you've seen something that looks like it. So it's like,
Right.
how do you combat that mentally?
Well, and then yeah, and then when you're working with people who are saying, "No, I've seen this," or "No, I heard things," and there is a genuine fear there. I mean, no, I can't explain that scientifically. Yes, it could all be in their minds. It could be in their collective mind. I still have to treat that as a very real thing because they are seeing that as real, and that's an element of psychology people don't like to delve into or accept. If a person believes something strongly enough that they're taking steps to protect themselves from it, that is a very real threat in their minds. And the argument that, well, you can't play into the delusion, you can't don't play into the crazy. That's my mom likes to say that one. Thanks, Mom. Um, but sometimes you have to, because you have to protect the person as well. You have to protect the group as well. And if they're deathly afraid of something, there is something they are afraid of, whether it's real or not.
Yeah. Their mind, one where it's real to them. And I've said that with
Yes,
people that I've interviewed. I don't necessarily have to believe everything that someone tells me that they experienced is 100% true. And I'm not saying that they're making it up or lying by any means. I'm just saying maybe what they're remembering isn't exactly how it happened, but that's how their mind has remembered it.
Right. Or
And
maybe how they perceived it wasn't,
yeah,
again, we're not robots.
yeah. And I feel like they 100% when they come on here and they talk about the weird things that happened to them, they are 100% telling me how they remember it happening and they're 100% being
Absolutely.
honest about it. That doesn't mean it's 100% accurate or I believe everything that they said because, again, I try and remain skeptical because maybe something else was going on, but this is just how you remembered it for some reason. That's how your mind covered something up to maybe something else happened. And this is how you manifested a way to deal with it because the human mind's weird like that.
And well, and then we could get into trauma-based care pretty easily with that because you mentioned how your mind covers it up. The brain is so amazing. And a random fact is that we know more about our oceans on Earth than we do about the human brain and the human mind. As a psychologist, as a type of neuroscientist, that is terrifying. We don't know enough about our own mind. We know more about the oceans, and we've only explored, I think it's 6% of the oceans now.
Yeah, 4 to 6%. I was getting ready to say they don't really know anything about the oceans either.
That's exactly, and that's why that's terrifying as any form of scientist who deals with the mind. It's so when you get into trauma-informed care, a person's mind has itself and disassociating to protect itself that is just so unique. Whether you believe in evolution or creation, it doesn't matter. Our minds are so unique. Like a computer, I make the comment, we're not robots. A computer can't even protect itself from things that humans' minds somehow manage to protect themselves from. So knowing that as a base and that's where I say there's always an element. It may be the tiniest kernel of truth, but there's something in what that person experienced. Maybe the fantasy was easier for a person's mind to take in than the reality because the reality was just so horrible or just so awful or just so unbelievable. Stranger than fiction things very much happen. And it's just the mind has to build those walls. It has to build those barriers. And I just, I wish we knew more about the human brain.
Yeah. I've said this multiple times, and I don't want to sound like I'm degrading anyone or not believing anyone that has these experiences, but sometimes I've often wondered if when people say they've been abducted by aliens and
Mhm.
they come down, they take them on, they do all these like sexual things to them or whatever. I'm always in the like thinking like, what if this is the mind covering up something else that happened when they were younger?
Mhm.
And that's to them what came in. They don't, their brain can't process like someone coming in their room in the middle of the night and doing that to them. Like, so they made it to be these monsters, these aliens or whatever came and did all this stuff to them.
And
That's,
actually, I do have an experience with a youth very much along that theory, based on physical evidence. I'm trying to be careful with some of her details, so I'm like going through what can I share. Based on a physical and evidence, we knew she had been. Is it safe to just use the terminology? I'm not sure how PC I need to be.
I don't really care what gets said, but some censor things do. So don't say the R word.
Okay. She had been definitely assaulted
Okay.
as a child. Those scars, that tearing was very much there. But she claimed that a demon had come up out of the floor and got into her bed and did these things to her. Um, I'm just going to say teenager, because again, I'm trying to be really careful with,
Yeah, that's fine.
we're talking about somebody who's still a minor, so I'm trying to be really careful. Um, but in her mind, it was easier to put that story that a demon did it. After doing a little bit of investigating and getting some more details from the family, we figured out it was someone in the family who had done that to her. And I think for her, it was easier to think a demon did it than the person in the family.
Yeah.
That's that kernel of truth. Did a demon do those things? No, I don't think so. But something did those things, or someone did those things. And it was just her mind's way of protecting her from what had happened.
That's the struggle I have with when it comes to these sorts of topics for me is you don't want to tell someone they're wrong.
Yeah.
And because I don't know. That's the thing. Like we have these assumptions, but we were never really there.
Yeah.
So they can go off of what we believe, what makes sense, but at the same time, like I don't want to be that person to tell someone they're ever wrong because I don't like when people tell other people they're like you said, you don't call someone crazy. I don't want to tell someone that they're
Don't like that
wrong
word.
about something they experienced because I wasn't there to experience it.
Yeah.
I've had plenty of people tell me that I saw a bear. I was like, well, we don't have bear in Indiana, but we also don't have upright walking canines in Indiana either. So there's that. But
Even I was like, a bear. What?
yeah. So that's what I hate when it comes to the cryptid communities. People are always like, oh, you saw a bear or this was a mangy bear here. Like people know what a bear looks like.
Yeah.
It's very hard to confuse a bear with a Bigfoot or a bear with a canine or a bear with anything else. Someone actually said it was could have been a wild kangaroo. I'm like, oh, those are apparently around here too. I didn't know I was in Australia, but
Oh, okay. Zombie kangaroo, sure.
yeah,
That's a horror movie coming out in a couple months. Um,
yeah. The write-offs that people give for answers for explanations are even more kooky than the actual things that most people see.
and then yeah, truth is stranger than fiction. And I think there's a lot of things out there that we don't know, that we can't explain yet. And I've told many a client that, you know, just because science can't explain it right now doesn't mean science won't be able to explain it in the future. Gonna go there. Star Trek, cell phones.
I don't, yeah, I don't, when it comes to with science and everything else, like I feel like there's definitely more out there that can be done, but at the same time, just on a scientific level, I don't know if I feel like they're risking their reputations if they start looking into certain things like this because it kind of gets frowned upon in general. So when people research into this type of things and they start believing these type of things, but like, no, this is what I do, you're basically damning yourself by
Yeah,
agreeing with the small little minority of people that are labeled by the higher upper people, whatever you want to call them, like is
right.
crazy.
Well, actually,
So,
when I first started working on my PhD, I had spoken to one of my mentors, and he was asking, well, what do you want to do with psychology? What would you do in the form of research? Because that's what I want to go into is research primarily. And I was describing to him parapsychology and existential psychology, and he talked me out of going into existential psychology. His reason was that if people see a PhD with general psychology behind it, that is more acceptable to the secular world than existential psychology or parapsychology. And that's just really unfortunate in in my mind. However, I did take his advice and I did choose to go general because the reality is once I've got my dissertation published and I've got the degree behind my name, I can go any field I want. It's general.
no.
Stay in school, kids.
The lesson to learn from this episode, stay in school.
Yes. Um, but that's parapsychology is such an interesting field, and then existential psychology. Um, I don't know if you've ever covered that on your channel. Is that something that
No,
people?
not really.
Okay, that's kind of the psychology of death and the psychology of dying. And it's such an underrepresented psychological phenomena. I mean, you'll hear about people who've had near-death experiences, um, but there's just so few psychologists who specialize in that particular field. It's
Yeah.
okay. So trying to think. We've talked about tulpas, kind of.
A little bit.
And like I said, I may be saying that wrong. So if someone's like, she's butchering it. I'm sorry. I've only ever seen it written.
Tulpas, talpas. I think it's tulpas.
Okay. Um, and the shared delusion, we can kind of go back to that. Um, because I've had, I mean, another experience I had, and this is where I say it was a unique one. And it kind of goes into the other direction. I know before it was like, well, was it aliens? Was it angels? I don't know. Um, but I had one where I was visiting a client. I have clients in their homes frequently, and she was renting a room. And I had met one of her housemates, elderly man, very kind, polite man, had met him several times. And I had gone to see her, and it had been about a week. And they had all commented about this smell coming in the hallway. And I stepped in the hallway and I was like, has anybody seen this gentleman in a while? And the thing is, they all insisted they had seen him just the morning before. There's no way the people in that house could have seen him. Just when I stepped in the hallway, based on the smell, and I'm sure you're kind of figuring out where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
And I called the landlord and I was like, I am not opening that door. And it wouldn't have mattered anyway. It turned out it was locked. I was like, but you need to get someone out here to do a wellness check and potentially the police. That smell was so strong. It was that sickly sweet, when there's rot nearby.
Right. Yeah.
And they couldn't get the door open. So like I said, it wouldn't have mattered anyway if I'd have tried. They had to go through the window outside for someone to get in. And the coroner told us later he had been deceased for about 2 weeks by that point. There's no way anyone in that house had seen him. Yet even myself, I had talked to that gentleman no more than a week prior. How? If
Yeah.
and then the coroner, when they come back and they say, yeah, he'd been deceased at least 2 weeks, it's like, but how? We all talked to this man. We know he was there. And they got him out, they cleaned the room out. And when they finished cleaning the room out, when you could not smell anything. It was very clean. The landlord, he had to hire like professionals and hazmat team, and I did not envy anybody that job. But he tried to rent the room out 3 times that I know of for sure. He may have tried more since then. And people would move in, and within 2 days of moving into the room, they insisted that smell had come back. They could smell it, and like it was enough, it was making a lady sick. There was nothing that should have been causing a smell. They had cleaned that room very thoroughly. Last time I talked to the landlord, he'd said he'd given up on renting the room out. He couldn't rent the room out because people kept going in there and getting sick. And that goes back to that. Can I explain that scientifically? They checked that room. They cleaned that room. They sanitized that room. What was causing the smell? And then the other experience connected to that, how did we all see and talk to that man during that 2 weeks when we're sure he was deceased? But we all did. It was more than one person. It was like 9 or 10 people. It wasn't like it was just me. It wasn't just my client. So it's not like it was 1 or 2 people feeding off of each other and saying, no, this is what happened. This was a big group of us, and a couple of them who were fairly removed from the house dynamics, me being part of that. I have no explanation for any of that other than science can't explain everything.
Yeah, that's a very strange incident because if people remember seeing him, you remember seeing him.
I saw him, yeah.
And they're saying he's been passed away for at least 2 weeks, and that's the timeline doesn't add up.
It doesn't. And I smelled in the hallway. Now, they had complained for about a week, but that's another thing. A body starts to break down after 3 or 4 days. They should have been smelling it longer than right at a week or just under a week.
Do they know how he died?
He passed in his sleep. He did go peacefully,
Okay.
was what we had been told. So at least there was that. Um,
It
and there
would
hasn't.
be
Mhm.
it would be fitting with the theme of my show, but like I wonder if maybe the things that you guys saw were actually it was him, but it was not
like
him.
his
Like
like
his
his
spirit.
spirit.
Right.
And that's where my mind goes to, because I know a lot of people say, well, we know exactly what happens after death. No, we don't.
I don't think
I'm gonna make
anybody does.
so many of my Christian friends mad. No, we don't.
Just to maybe poke a stick into it, I feel like, and I've heard different people talk about this a little bit too, but you always hear that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm. I've heard that.
What if we're not supposed to go to that light? What if we are like we're told and we believe that's where we're supposed to go, but what if that is where it cycles us back into what we're doing again? Like,
Oh,
what if there's other things that we can do not to go into the light? I know everyone that's really, oh, you got to go to the light. The light's call. But what if the light is not the place we're supposed to go? The light is there because it wants us to believe that's where we're supposed to be. I don't know. That's
well,
some of the weird stuff I think about every once in a while.
well, no, and you that's okay, because you caused me to then think, the fly trap with the light, or the fireflies that then go into the light bulb.
Mm-hmm.
The light is the dangerous thing. Yet that's where they automatically gravitate. So you have that is something to consider. Is, are we told all throughout our lives go towards the light? Well, that light could be an oncoming train. Thanks, Dad. I remember him saying that when I was a kid. Like, oh, that's a good memory.
Like in my mind, and I don't know how to word it correctly, but basically, like if they claim that we are light beings,
Mhm.
so we're supposed to go towards the light. Well, what if there's things out there that feed on us and they want us to go to that light because it's like you just said, it's almost like the trap.
Yeah.
So they lead us to this light so then that we become servants again and we do the same cycle again. Like we don't ever get past this life. Like we literally are. Some people say we're in a simulation. Well, maybe it's because the only ones that get out of this simulation is if we don't go back into the light.
Yeah.
Maybe there's another way we can go. I don't know. I don't even know if there's a light at all. I'm just going by what people have claimed.
And I've heard, and this was a client that he has since passed away, so I kind of feel safe talking about him. I was with him when he got the news that he had cancer so severe. They were describing what they were going to do to combat this cancer. And I'm sitting there with him, and I don't think he was processing anything the doctor was saying. And it just hit me, and I was like, you guys haven't said what stage it is. And they just looked at me and they were like, oh, it doesn't matter. We're going to fight it. And I'm talking, I'm sitting next to an 80-year-old man, mind you. And I was just like, what stage is it? He had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And it was in his blood, was my understanding. Not a medical doctor, so bear with me there.
Yeah,
It was that he made the decision not to do anything. And of course, the doctors were like, no, you can fight this. You can beat this. 80-year-old man. I 100% supported his decision, and I would even today. He was like, it's not worth it. I'm old. I'm tired. I just want to go. I visited him about a week before he passed away. And he had made a comment that his mother kept standing in the doorway. And why was his mother there? Like there was enough still with him that he knew his mom shouldn't be standing there. And I had just held his hand and I was like, Jerry, it's okay. If you need to go be with your mom, go be with your mom. And his niece had told him kind of the same thing. She was in the room. And then when he passed away, his niece was the one who told me he'd passed away. She had wondered, was he seeing his mom? Was it really his mom there, or was that his mind putting something comforting there? And in that moment, his mother was comforting. But that kind of goes back to that existential psychology, and that we don't really have a lot of information on when people die. We don't know what happens. We just don't. We can
Yeah.
theorize all day long, but there's no data. There's no real information behind that.
There's definitely ideas and beliefs, but no one truly knows until we
And
die.
where I
And
was
then
going with that was
we may never know either.
we may never know. And where I was going with that was that he wasn't seeing a light. He was seeing a person. He was seeing his mother. So when you were saying, well, maybe not everyone sees the light, I don't know that Jerry did. I think that's what he saw. And maybe it's different for everybody. Again, we don't know. And it's one of those topics that even the scientific community goes, no, not touching that. Not going there.
Yeah.
But why not?
Sometimes they just don't want to rock the boat, I guess.
Well, that comes down to religion, and every religion has their own belief system of what happens after a person dies. Whether you believe in heaven, hell, or the many realms, or nirvana, or whatever you personally believe in, we don't know, and that's why I say I'm kind of poking and going to make a lot of Christians mad. I know. I'm sorry, guys.
Now, I feel like at this rate, if anyone listens to my show in general, like I'm not against any sort of religion one way or the other, but I always feel like it's kind of hypocritical of a lot of people for some of the things that they go about and things they say and the things they believe. It's like, how can you tell people one thing and then turn around and be the exact thing you said not to be?
Oh,
So,
yeah. Oh, yeah. I live in California. I could almost start a political channel with how often I make fun of the politicians.
that is one thing I try not to do on this show too much is go down that rabbit hole of politics because it's nothing but arguments.
Absolutely. And it can be. Everyone feels so strongly. And I had this conversation with my nephew because he was fighting with his brother, and he's like, well, who's right? And I had to look at him and say, you're both right and you're both wrong.
Right.
And that's humanity. That's the difference in our experiences. We may both experience the same thing, and we may both be right as to what happened, but we may both be wrong as to what happened too. But we're not cookie cutters. We're not robots. We're all different. And I just wish everyone could see that for how beautiful that really is, that we're all different. And I guess I'll kind of leave that there.
Well, is there anything else you would like to discuss? Because if not, we can probably get close to wrapping this one up.
No, I was just kind of letting you direct it and guide it.
I don't ever come into shows with any sort of narrative or any sort of guidelines or anything, so it's all just kind of free flowing. But
Okay.
I always want to make sure that if there's anything that guest wants to speak about, talk about, give them an opportunity before we wrap things up. Because I just feel like once you kind of talk about the things you want to talk about, and then it starts to get into just random conversations or whatever. And I don't know if people enjoy listening to people just talking or not. Like, I don't know how my audience actually, what they prefer, to be 100% honest. Like, I've been doing this for 2 years and I don't really hear a whole lot from people.
That's fair. It's like, I actually sometimes, like, when I'm listening to other podcasts or just like I put a lot of YouTubers on, and I'll just listen to them in the background. Sometimes I like the chaos of the random conversations, and sometimes I'm like, just get back on topic.
I try and keep the show for the most part on topic. So for anyone listening, and if that's what you enjoy, you're welcome. But no, there's other times where we end the recording, but then we talk for like another hour afterwards. So
Oh, okay.
for me, like that's just how I kind of go about it. Like I don't want to have the whole show just focused on random conversation.
That's completely fair.
But
Absolutely. So, yeah, that's we kind of covered the basics of what I had wanted to cover when it comes to shared experiences or shared delusions, the kernels of truth behind every delusion or hallucination or whatever you want to call it, um, and why I don't believe anyone is ever truly crazy.
I believe that there is a lot of weird things out there, and people see a lot of weird things, and sometimes you've said it like the truth is stranger than fiction,
Oh yeah.
and the things that we see makes people think you're crazy. And I'm not going to say that there's not anybody that don't have any sort of mental issues, but I'm not going to tell someone that what they saw is not true because, again, I know what that's like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Daphne, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on here and talking. It's definitely been informative, a little bit eye-opening. Hopefully the audience gets a little bit from it.
Absolutely. I hope so. And um, I don't know if you put my name in the podcast, they can look me up. I'm pretty easy to find. You just got to spell my first name right.
So if there's any way you want people to contact you, you can just let me know and I can put all that in the show notes for you.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, well, we're going to head on out. So thanks for Daphne for coming on here and talking, and thanks for listening. Good night, everyone. And that's the show, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to the contact section of tinfoiltales.com. Just get your message to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. And just remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.
Tinfoil Tales in the headphones. Yeah, it's time to rock. Got a story about a cryptid creature. Let's take a walk. Bigfoot, Dogman, they're out there in the dark. But the truth is out there like an alien spark. UFO sightings got the whole world shook. Conspiracies unfold like a story in a book. Media control, trying to keep us blind. But oh, before gonna use my own mind. In history, they don't want us to know the secrets they hide, the truth they won't show. Dominant of society, they keep us in chains. But I'm standing tall, it's time to break the reins. Control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history